Does running feel harder than you feel like it needs to? Almost like you're trying too hard to run at whatever pace you're running? Well, today I'm going to break down what's happening and making running feel harder than it needs to, and I'm going to show you what you can do to make it feel easier. I'm going to do this by breaking down three main points. The first one is how stride length, cadence, and strength are all related. The second point is how not overstriding and landing underneath your body while you're running changes so much in your efficiency. And the third point is giving you some normal values that you can look at. So for cadence, what's a normal cadence? For stride length, how far should you be going for each stride? So I'll give you some general ideas so you can effectively look at your own data, and then I'll use a real world example to show you how that may change as you're running. I'm sure you've heard before that cadence makes a big difference in how efficiently and smoothly you're running, but it's actually just one of two parts of an equation. And that equation is what I call the speed equation. It tells you that speed, how fast you're running, is equal to stride length times cadence. So how far you're going with each step and how many times per minute you're taking that step. So cadence can make us more efficient, but it has to be one of two parts of an equation that balance each other well so that we aren't leaning too far one way or another. So that begs the question, what happens if cadence goes too high or too low? If cadence goes too high, you're going to look like the road runner. I'll put him up right here. His legs are spinning super fast, but he's actually not covering any ground. In fact, if your whole idea was to take more steps per minute, you would end up spending more energy trying to take fast steps than you would actually moving yourself forward. On the other side of that coin, if your cadence is really low, you'll eventually just start walking or bound, and neither of those are going to be particularly efficient. So that's cadence. Now, what about stride length? If we make it too short, it's going to be like you're walking. You're not going to cover a whole lot of distance. If the goal is to get faster, that's not the way we want to go. So you might say, what if we get a really long cadence? If we take really big steps and cover a ton of ground? That seems like it'd be a really good idea. The issue with it is, imagine here, you're in a car and you're driving along, then you just tap the brakes. And then you tap the brakes again. And then you tap the brakes again. That's what happens when you overstride. Your heel starts landing in front of your center of mass, and you're hitting a braking force. There is a negative vector. So if you're moving this way and your heel's striking and you have energy coming back at you, that's not going to make for a very fast stride. You need to get a stride length that's long enough that you're covering ground, but it is landing underneath you. Now, as I mentioned, we can increase either one of these to make ourselves faster. If we increase our cadence, we're going to spend more of our energy trying to turn our legs over faster. That's not a problem if it's giving us the result we want. Alternatively, we can increase our stride length, and if we push the ground away and land under our body, that's going to be okay too, but it's also going to take more energy from us to put that force in the ground. So what this tells us is we need to find a balance of both of these points. If our cadence is really fast and we've got a really short stride length, that's not going to work. If we've got a really long stride length and a really low cadence, that's not going to work either. So we need to marry it up. I actually like using a rubber band like this. For an example, if we're taking a bunch of steps, this band isn't moving a whole lot. There's not a lot of energy moving around. Some, but not much. If we spend a whole bunch of energy and move it, we get a really big flick, but that's going to take a second, and then we're going to have to do it again. And then we're going to have to wait a second and do it again. Now, if we can find just the right amount of in between, we can get into a rhythm. It stays smooth, and you have a really nice stride that's very energy efficient. So for you at home, you may be saying, what can I do to actually kind of figure this out? And this is a tip you can use in your next run to kind of see what feels right to your body. You've probably got something ingrained already, and that may be close to where you need to be. But if you try this, you may find a little different cadence and stride length for the day. So just like the rubber band, I want us to find a nice, efficient mix of these two different metrics, cadence and stride length, and we can start applying it. And you may say, how do I do that? Well, I've got an at-home tip for you to try when you are out on your next run. As you're getting warmed up, you can start with a relatively high cadence, so your feet are turning over pretty quick, but you're not going very far, kind of being like the Roadrunner. But what I'm going to have you do is as you start covering a little more ground, I'm going to have you open that stride length up a little bit. Now, as you do that, your cadence might actually drop a little bit, and I'm okay with that. But what I like is starting with the cadence so we know we're landing underneath our body. It's kind of like a dribble. I'll put a video of me doing a dribble on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. But we're going to take these steps, open them up, and then try and find the balance where I'm running the pace I want to run. I know that I'm landing under my body still, and I'm covering as much ground as I can while it still feels comfortable. You can practice with that cadence and stride length for a little while, lock into your pace, and see how it feels on your run. If that feels particularly good, see if it's any different than your data is otherwise. So if you can go back and look at your watch and see what data pops up, you can see, is my stride length or cadence different on this run or not, and did that run feel easier or not? And this balance is going to look different for everyone. Somebody's going to like a faster cadence and a smaller stride length. You have other people that might like a longer stride and less strides per minute. So long as you're being efficient with it, I'm happy either way. Now, there's a key piece with all of this efficiency stuff that I don't think is talked about quite enough with runners, or at least definitely not implemented enough. And it's something that I think can really unlock how comfortable your stride feels over time. Now, it isn't always easy to implement it, but it is relatively simple. There aren't a bunch of big question marks around this. I think everybody would agree that being strong is helpful, but why particularly is it helpful? So I would say it comes down to three really big reasons why strength is helpful. First one is being able to produce more force will make running with less force production easier. It's going to help with durability, keeping everything strong and durable throughout big training blocks. And then inside of each run, you're going to be better at resisting fatigue. I've mentioned it before, but with a big strength background for myself, I attribute that to a big part of how I've been able to stay so healthy as I've gone from running a couple miles per week all the way up to running 40 plus miles per week on a regular basis with workouts in there. The one additional thing that I think can actually also make a big difference that's kind of more supplemental is having better stabilizers. If you can get really good at bracing your body for impacts with the ground, if your stabilizers are better, you're going to be more efficient at putting energy into the ground and getting all that efficiency back as you have that collision with the ground and step forwards. And a really easy cue for this actually is go to your home gym and do some work. It doesn't have to be crazy, but if you like squatting heavy, do that. If you can do body weight lunges, awesome. Kettlebell swings, anything you can do to strengthen your body is going to help you long term. I have an entire video linked right here that's going to go over exactly what you need to be doing in the gym, why you do different things, different times of the year. And I give you even some examples of what I'm doing for myself personally, having had a pretty big background in strength and conditioning. And as always with energy and producing force and all this extra strength that we're getting from lifting, if we're not putting it in the right direction, it's not going to do us a ton of good. So as I alluded to with the stride length, we can either overstride if our stride length starts getting longer, or we can start using the benefit of being stronger and get better at pushing the ground away behind us, cycling our leg through, down and under, and landing right under our center of mass. That's going to make it the easiest to recycle all this force we've produced and keep ourselves moving forward as smoothly as possible, again with the goal of making running feel easier. You can see it in this video here. I slowed down myself on a treadmill, and I'm going to show you two different examples here. The first one, I'm landing really far out in front of my body. My heel strikes, slowly comes underneath and cycles through. That's that braking force that's tapping the brakes as we're driving our car, like I mentioned in the example earlier. If you do this, this could be a reason why running feels harder than it Should be, honestly. Now, in this second clip, you can see me here. I'm landing right underneath my body. I have a very tall posture. Everything is staying in line. And then you can see in this close-up, I'm actually pushing the ground away behind me. That lets me put all that force horizontally instead of having this really big vertical component to my run. Actually, it also makes it easier on your joints too. So if your knees hurt when you're running, this could be a really big piece of what's going on. If you're striking too far out in front, your knees, your hips, something is absorbing that extra force, which isn't really what we want. So when you do get your foot landing underneath you, with whatever cadence you need, with whatever stride length you need, it's so imperative that we're landing in a proper position. If we do that right, everything else is going to come along pretty easily. I did mention earlier that there are individual variances for people. Even if you have people the same height, someone might like a faster cadence, someone might like a longer stride length to run the same pace. It's so true that companies like ASICS have developed the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo and the ASICS Metaspeed Edge. They are two of their top tier racing shoes, and they're literally developed to help people with their stride length or with their cadence. If you push more energy into the ground per step, you might like the Metaspeed Sky. If you really start getting your turnover faster as you speed up, you may like the Metaspeed Edge better. So for me, as an example, I very much fall into this stride length camp. If I'm running a 10-minute per mile pace, I'm probably hanging out around 155 strides per minute. If I go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and I start running pretty quick, call it around a 5-minute and 30-second mile pace, my cadence is actually still probably right around 165 steps per minute. That's not a huge gap in how many steps I'm taking to cover that extra distance, but for me, I find I cover way more ground because I'm pretty efficient at putting energy down. And again, as long as I'm not getting my stride way far out in front of my body, that's a-okay. But there is an upper limit to either side of these. So when I'm sprinting, or at least when I did a lot of sprinting for track and field, my cadence would have to get very high. So I was covering a lot of ground with each step, of course, because I was trying to sprint as fast as I could, but something had to make up that difference. There's a limit to how much force I could put into the ground while being efficient. My cadence would then take over. So I'm saying I'm okay spending this extra energy to turn my legs over faster so that I can get a total faster speed. So for that, my stride length gets pretty long, but my cadence can go up as high as 220 steps per minute. I'll try and find a screenshot on here somewhere. I'll at least have something that shows over 200. So what are some optimal numbers? You hear 180 steps per minute thrown around all the time, but as I've said before, that was a study done with really elite runners running very quickly. So just like myself, when I start running faster, my cadence turns up. No big surprise there. What I'm really seeing for most folks out there who have a relatively efficient cadence, it's somewhere between 150 and 170 strides per minute. If you're really fast, you may be an outlier. If your cadence just happens to be really high, again, it's fine to be on the higher end of that. If you're a little bit on the lower end of that, if you're in the 140 range and you feel less efficient than you maybe feel like you should, we can take a look at that and say, are we striding too far and having to absorb force, wait for our hips to come over, and then push again? So you've probably heard those numbers before, but see if you're falling into that range. If you have a running watch, if you have an Apple Watch or anything like that, that's going to show you how many strides per minute you're taking, just see where you fall. If you're well below that, maybe we consider looking at your stride and saying, are we overstriding? Are we landing too far in front of our center of mass? If so, just bring it underneath yourself a little bit, turn up that cadence a tiny bit and see if it makes you feel better. I think stride length is talked about a little bit less in terms of what like a normal stride length is. And again, these are just rules of thumb, but if you look at roughly 80 to 90% of your height as your stride length, that's going to give you a good idea of if you're falling into like an average stride length. So for an example, we're just going to use someone who is 5 foot tall because it makes for easy math. If you are at 80%, of your height in your stride length, that'd be about 4 feet. If you are at 90% of your height in stride length, that'd be about 4.5 feet. So that person could look at their watch, say, oh, I am right at 4 feet 3 inches of stride length. Or I'm at 5 feet of stride length. And it's like, man, you're putting a lot of force into the ground there. Or on the other side, if you're only covering 3.5 feet per stride, maybe you need to consider getting a little stronger and putting more force into the ground. So I don't think we have to get super hung up on the numbers there, but if you can just use these as general guides to say, am I going in the right direction? Just like a scale, it's not, is the number exactly perfect? It's, are you trending kind of the right way that you are wanting to go? If your watch is getting generally good data, you're going to be able to see, am I making a more efficient stride over time, or am I just staying kind of stagnant? Here's some actual real data from one of my workouts. It was 10 by 800 meters. And I'm starting this run out relatively easy, 8-minute and 30-second pace. And you can see my cadence here is hovering right around 155, 160. I get a little push, it goes up. And you can see here at a 12-minute and 35-second pace, as I'm trotting just real slowly around the track, I'm still at 160 strides per minute. So that's pretty interesting. But as I come into my first rep here, you know, I'm moving a little quicker, high 6-minute mile pace, and my cadence is staying again right around 150, 160. Go into a break, and then I have some faster reps here, down to a 6-minute and 20-second mile pace, and I'm hovering again right around 160 strides per minute. And for this last one, you can see I'm still hanging around a 5:44 pace, and I'm at 165 strides per minute. So for me, I am way leaned to that force production side, where I really like opening up my stride length. At 5:44, I'm at 165 strides per minute. Over here at 12-minute and 15-second pace, I'm at 162 strides per minute. So don't get too hung up on it. Find what works for you. And we'll come over to stride length next. So cadence will go away. So this purple line here is going to show my stride length. So for me at 6'2", I should be somewhere between like 4 feet 11 inches and 5.5 feet for my stride length. So just coming to this rep right here, you can see my stride length is at 5.35 feet. So I'm almost dead center for the middle of that. But again, as I go faster, remember this rep, I was moving relatively quick. It starts to open up more. So I actually get just a little bit over 5.5 feet as I go. And as I finish the rep, I'm still hanging around that upper end of what works for me. But then when I come down again, my stride length gets super short. Right here, I'm not falling into the average of 80 to 90% of my stride length. Now that's because I'm going a little slower, but that's okay. So that just shows you kind of an example of what works for me. You can look at your own data in the same way and say, in context, when I'm running this pace I want to be running, does my stride length and cadence match up to make a pace that works for me? So your big takeaways from this should really be find a stride length and cadence that works for you. Really emphasize landing under your center of mass and how important it is for your efficiency. And go get in the gym, get stronger, and see how nicely that applies as you get better at putting force into the ground throughout your runs. As always, if you made it this far, thank you so much for following along. Feel free to take a look. I've got a video here that's going to pop up magically for you from the YouTube algorithm. Or if you want to take a look at a playlist that goes over everything kind of that beginner runners need to know, go ahead and take a look right here. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.